Hey, what is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you guys are having a very good Friday morning, and hope you guys are ready for episode 9 of our Firebase real-time application video lesson today. So let's quickly go over what we did last video, and then we'll talk about what we will be tackling today. So to the simulator, here we go. We have our view up here, and upon clicking the title view, we slide in our newly created chat log controller, and upon entering some text messages down here, so sample message, and hitting enter, we'll see some messages being entered inside of our Firebase database with a hard-coded name and just the text that we enter down in our UI. So that's what we built in episode 8 last time, and so make sure to get caught up with that video. It should be available in the description below. Now, in today's video, I really want to show you guys how to link up your messages so that we don't hard code a name such as Brand Stark in here. We want to be able to actually respond to our new message controller, and we want to actually select a user in this list and then use the name of that user instead of Brand Stark. In other words, I'm going to tab into my controller here. This is kind of my completed application, and I'm going to click on New Message Controller. And upon clicking perhaps Egret, we have Egret up here. And I want to show you guys how to slide this controller down and then slide over this new controller for the user that we selected. So I hope you guys are ready to kind of rock and roll here. And what I'm going to do is just run my application to make sure I am in the correct place. So here we go. We have our message controller. We have Jon Snow up here. And then I want to show you guys first how to slide down this controller upon selection of one of these characters here. So let's go to a new message controller here. Hope you guys are still with me. I want to actually implement a method called didSelectRow at index path. I'm going to call it dismiss view controller, flag of true for animation and completion. I'm just going to hit enter and erase this bit of code and let Xcode finish this override for me. So I'm going to run that. And let's see what we get. So let's see, I want to actually include a print statement here, right here, dismiss completed, just to make it obvious what is going on in our code. And running this application now, I'm going to dismiss the user after selecting, for example, that, and then dismiss gets completed, print it down in the console below. And now what do we want to do whenever it finishes dismissing? Well, we want to actually call this function that pushes this chat log controller onto the navigational stack. In other words, in messages controller, at the very bottom, we have a function called show chat controller. So we have this method here. Now, inside of new messages controller, inside of this completion of the dismiss, wouldn't it be nice if we could call something like messages controller dot show chat controller like that? Wouldn't that be nice? Well, we can't do that right now because we don't have a reference to messages controller, which I will create right above right here. And now that we have that, we just need to fix this with an optional question mark and a self right in front inside of this closure block like that. So if I run this now, it's going to make an attempt to call this on messages controller. However, because we are in here and we haven't set this to any object yet, this is nil, so this will just perform a no-op command. So nothing happens whenever we execute on nil. Now, what do we want to do? We want to set messages controller every time we click on this button up there, and we click on that button, call it new message icon, and then we handle new message. And in here, we will just say new message controller, message controller dot messages controller equals self. So having set this variable, we can, let's see if I need to remove that breakpoint. Nope, I think we are okay. So here we go. So click there, and we're going to slide this in, and it's going to slide in the chat log controller like that. So one more time, click here, slides down, and slides over. So pretty nice, pretty nice. Now what I also want to do is I want to slide in the controller and change the navigation items to say the actual user's name. So I'm gonna click on perhaps Tyrion Lannister, slides over, and we get his name up here with some funny text. And now how do we do that? How do we do that? So here is how I'm going to show you. Whenever we tap on, let's see, going back to my app here, whenever we tap on one of these guys, we can actually figure out what the user is if we just create a user reference equal to self.users with the index of index path row. So that's the actual selected user in this guy there. And if I want to pass this back to MessagesController, I need to pass it in via this method call right here, show chat controller. And I am going to modify this to include show chat controller for user with a parameter of user like that. And I'm going to comment that out because we don't need to tap on the title view anymore. Finally, I will go back to my, let's see, new message controller. And here I need to actually use, let's see, I'm going to build first, show chat for user, and just simply punch in this user from the line above. So let's do that. And I'm going to put a breakpoint at line 106, hitting the new user, perhaps Sam Tarley, is going to execute this function. And the user at this point is Sam Tarley. So that is looking pretty good. Now I'm going to also send in the user to this entire chat log controller. And I'm going to do that right now after I have some good old green tea. Okay, so I want to actually set chat log controller.user equals this user right above right there. And I can't do that right now because chat log controller, this guy right here, doesn't really have a reference to user at all. So I'll create a user reference, user to be user like so as an optional user. And now if I build, this looks okay. All right, so if I run that, nothing is going to change just yet. So I'm going to chat log controller with my user here. So we're going to click on Sam again, one of my favorite characters in the show. And in here, I can actually use a brace, type in did set brace and close. I can actually do navigation item.title equals user.name. So when I do this, this bit of code gets executed whenever you set this property called user. So let's do that, and now we get chat log controller right there because we are hard coding it right there. So let's delete the hard code value of the navigation item title, and hopefully we'll actually get something in our nav bar. So we get Sam Tarley right there. Let's try another user, Hodor, slides over with Hodor. So pretty good stuff. Now hopefully that was not too hard to follow. Essentially we're sending in this user from this controller, and then we're sending it to the messages controller, and then lastly we send it over to chat log controller. So it goes from one, bam, bam, right there. Not too bad, hopefully. And that's how we get the user inside of this controller here. And finally, we're here in this handle send block that I want to look at. In other words, I'm here and I want to send a message right here. And upon hitting the send button, we enter this message down here with the name of Bran Stark. So remember in the last video, I posed this question here. Is it the best thing to include the name inside of these messages? For example, Bran Stark in here. And for example, if I just modified this to say user.name, will give me the user's name of Sam Tarley up there in this example. And I think we need to unwrap it like that as well. So that is the question. And I'm going to argue that it is a very bad idea to include a name like this. For example, if you are trying to change your name, if you are, for example, Bran Stark, and you change your name to something like maybe Tony Stark, for example, Tony Stark like that, you change the name, right? But the message name actually still says Bran Stark, so you don't really know if this has ever been updated, unless you change the name here and then you run through all your thousands of messages and change the name yourself, which is really inefficient. So instead of saving the name in there, we actually want to save this ID for the user, which is this AZA AR value. That's what we actually want to save, not the name. So we need to actually save this thing called a toID perhaps. So I want to actually save let toID equals user.id, right? That's what I really want to save inside of here. So I want toID to be that. But we don't have this property on user called ID. So why don't we create this property as a string like so. And we try to build, but we can't build it because we need to unwrap it twice like that. And there we go. We can now finally build. So I'm going to go into here and show you what user ID needs to be. So whenever I hit the send, it's going to hit this breakpoint. So let's use Brandstark and let's use a message like that. Send. Okay, now at this breakpoint of sending this message AAA, we're going to look at what self.user is, and you see how ID is nil. In other words, toID will be nil right there. So it's going to crash when you try to unwrap it like that. So let's just stop the app right now and see what we can do to this ID value. Well, remember way back when we created the application, probably 4 or 5 episodes ago, when we click on, or when we load this list of users, we're inside of new MessagesController, and we call this method inside of viewDidLoad called fetchUser, and we do this observe type right here, and every time we're in here, we get the snapshot value. So let me just cancel out here, and this will execute that block right there. So snapshot, let's see, snapshot value, I'm just going to print object snapshot.value down there. This gives me the name, the profile image URL, and then also the email. Essentially, it gives me this information here. And I actually want to access this ID right here. So this is the UID, the 7OU value, AZ8. That's actually the ID. And we access that value via snapshot.key. So snapshot.key, that gives us this value here, which is that value right there. And I am actually going to just simply set user.id to snapshot.key. So doing that, all of our users inside of new MessageController will get the actual ID set on the user every time we set up this entire list. In other words, when I tap Brandstark right there and go to, let's see, my breakpoint in chat.log.controller, let's set another breakpoint here, and type in another message, try to send that, and self.user is now this AZA value. So let's see if I can get there. Nope. So let's print that out there, and we get that, which is this value down here for Brandstark. So now I can actually send toID if I just continue here. See there, this new message contains the toID, which belongs to Brandstark. Now I don't have to depend on the name anymore. I know exactly what it is because I have a reference to the actual user. So that's how that works. And while we're here, I want to actually include something like the from ID as well, because a message really needs to have the sender and then the recipient. So the sender will be called the from ID, and this will be retrieved from FIR auth current user, and we need the UID like that. So this gives us an optional value. And if we just try to set from ID like this, from ID, it'll actually complain about this because it doesn't expect optional values inside of this values dictionary. So we've unwrapped it like that. And okay, and while we're here, I also want to set something called a timestamp for all of our messages so we know when this message was sent out. And I'm going to do that by trying to set this value of NSDate time since 1970, which gives me the amount of seconds that have passed since this 1970 date. And now we just put it inside of this values dictionary via, let's use the key of timestamp and then the value of timestamp like that. So it's going to complain because Swift doesn't actually like these values of NS time intervals. So if we just simply cast this as an NS number like that, perhaps, we should be okay. So that'll give us the actual number in here. And if we just want to make it an int, we can do that as well, just to make our lives a little simpler. And that's what we kind of want inside of our messages. So I want to run this entire application now, and I'm going to hit a send for a message intended for Brand Stark, and I'm going to hit AAA, hit the send, look inside of this newly created message. We get the from ID from this 7OU, which is Jon Snow, and the to ID is Brand Stark with the timestamp of this and the message of AAA. So that's pretty good. And that's kind of how our messages are going to be structured inside of our node. So because we have a bunch of messages up here that are kind of in a corrupted state, is what I'm going to call it, I'm going to remove this entire message node, and I'm going to create some new messages following our new structure. So inside of here, I'm going to say hello brand 1, and then I need 2, and then I need 3. So these are the 3 messages that are currently inside of my system right now. So now that we have that, instead of showing the messages here, I'm going to actually make it easier for us to understand and follow, and actually show my messages inside of this table view instead. So here is what I am going to do. I'm going to go to MessagesController, and I am going to view the load. Here is what I need to do. I will need to execute a function called listen for, or actually observe. Let's see, observe messages. That's probably a good name. Observe, and then I'm going to create this function called func, paste that in there, and I'm going to observe the messages inside of this node right here. So to do that, we will create a reference of fr database reference, and to get to this particular node messages, we need to just use a child path of messages like that, and I'm going to observe event type like this, and I'm going to use this cancel block right there. So let me just show you why I use the cancel block. So if I try to type child added and then hit that, hit enter, and hit snapshot like that, and hit something like this, right? So for whatever reason, the Xcode IDE fails to compile this or fails to autocomplete this properly. So if we use the event type of this cancel block instead, it fixes it for us. So instead of child added, yes, is what I want. We'll use snapshot for this, and then this code will be blank for now, and this cancel block will just be nil. So if we just print out snapshot, I wonder what we get in the console. I'm going to load the application. We're going to observe the messages, and inside of our console, we'll print out all of these messages down here. So if I pull this up, we get hello brand 1, hello brand 2, and hello brand 3 with the proper from IDs and timestamp values and to IDs. So that is what we get. And now I want to actually show this inside of this table view controller, which is what this is right here. So to do that, I want to do this rather intelligently, right? And let's not be naive about it. So to capture all of this information here, we will need to introduce the second model class in our project, which I'll just create as a subclass of, let's see, NS object. This will be message. Pretty self-explanatory as to what the class will do. And instead of Coco, let's import UIKit. Makes a little more sense. Here we'll use these 4 properties of from ID, which is a string. Let's see, var text, which is also a string. This timestamp is not a string, it is an NS number. And this toID is a string value like so. So they're all optionals, because if you don't set it as optional, it needs to be instantiated as a certain value. So let's keep it that way. Go back to the MessagesController. Inside of our snapshot, we are going to convert all of these values into a message object. So we want this message object like this somehow. So I'm going to build, and we get nothing. So to do this construction, we will access this dictionary right here via snapshot.value. So I'm going to say if let dictionary equals snapshot.value as this string to any object. See object dictionary. We are going to construct this message simply by saying message.setValues for keys with dictionary of this dictionary right there. And upon doing that, all of our messages, for example, print message.text, will be constructed properly. So I'm going to run this application. Inside of the console below, we should see hello brands 1, 2, and 3, hopefully. So hello brand 1, 2, and 3. And that's how we know our messages are kind of built out properly. And if I want to load all of that inside of my controller, I need to specify the number of cells and the actual cells for the table. So why don't we do that right here? If I specify number of row in section and return, for example, a number of 5 inside of here for cell for row at index path, we can construct a dummy cell very easily like this. And let's just hack it in for now. This will be subtitle. Reuse identifier will just be some kind of string. So this is a hack. We should always DQ our cells. But anyhow, let's just do it for this example here, and I'll fix it later. So cell.text label will be text. Let's see, nope, that's not what I want. .text equals some awesome text. Like so. Now if I run this application, we'll see 5 cells with this text. And then I'll pump in the message in just a little bit later. So we get that right there. And here is what we need to do. We need to actually use an array to hold all of these messages here. So why don't I create it right above var messages equal this message array. So I'm going to just construct it right away right here. This is how you construct an empty message array. And inside of this print statement, I'm going to remove the print and type in, see, I think we need the self messages dot append this message that we just created right above right here. And after we're done with all this, let's see, after we're done with all this, we can call self.tableview.reload data. So remember, this is going to crash. This will crash because of background thread. So let's call this on dispatch async main thread like this. So dispatch async, and this needs to dispatch get main queue. This will just hit enter. We get the completion block, and calling this in here, we'll get a refresh of our table. And finally, for the messages to show up in this guy, we need to return number of rows will be messages.count. And here we'll actually, instead of saying this, we actually have to say the message text, which is, first we need to get a reference to the message for the proper row, messages index path row, like that. And then here we'll say message.text, like that. And now let's see what our table looks like. So if we load our app, we get our text, we get those 3 values here. So if I type in some other bit of text, for example, for Melisandre, hello, red lady, how do you do? And try to hit the, let's see, I'm going to hit enter here, puts a new message down here. If I go back, we actually see this message over here as well. So there's a lot of things we have to fix here, but this is currently the state of where we are. If we also set the, let's say if we set cell.detailTextLabel.text to this message.text instead, and we set the top text label to toID, we'll actually see who we sent it to, and then on the bottom we'll see the actual text. So these AZA values belong to this brand start character, and this GAF7 belongs to this Melisandre character. So we can actually figure out how to get their names a little bit later. All right, that about wraps it up for today. I hope you guys are kind of seeing at least a glimpse as to how the application is coming together. Hope you guys liked today's video. Make sure to hit that like button if you did, and also subscribe to the channel. All right, in the next episode, I'm going to show you how to load the user's names and also their user profile images. In addition to that, I'm going to show you how to group all your messages so that you only show the latest message for each one of your friends. And furthermore, if you want to download the project for today's video lesson, you can click on the download link above. Follow me on Twitter at Build App. Finally, if you want to learn more about iOS development, click on the 3 playlist links on the bottom to get even better at iOS programming. That's about it, guys. Keep on coding, and I'll see you next time.